Welcome to Lecture 12, Autonomic and Somatic Nervous Systems. Now, this is a pretty key lecture, so if you don't understand anything in this lecture, please use the office hours immediately because we're going to be using everything in this lecture for the rest of the course. Now, let's kick off Lecture 1 and let's do an overview of the autonomic nervous system. And here's our mapping, right? Our electrical mapping of the entire nervous system. Now, what we've done in the past lectures is we received a sensory message through that sensory neuron that now brings that information to the central nervous system, which integrates, we make a decision, and now we're going to start doing something about that sensory message, right? So these motor pathways are exiting out of the spinal cord, on the ventral spinal cord, out of ventral roots. And now we're going to now turn on either the somatic nervous system or the autonomic nervous system. And I'm going to start off talking about the autonomic nervous system. And so, yes, there are 3 branches of the autonomic nervous system, but I'm not going to talk about the enteric branch until we get to the digestive system. But today, I'm going to talk about sympathetic and the parasympathetic branches, right? Let's do this. So the 2 branches, the 2 main branches that work with each other is something called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And they act much like a seesaw. And I don't know if you folks know what a seesaw is because nowadays I don't see any of these, toys in the playground. But this is what a seesaw is. And you have one person sit on one end and the other person sit on the other. And then you can now push your legs off and one person will go up as the other person goes down, and it is not dangerous at all. But as a child, we did used to try to propel the other person, have them fly off, and maybe that's why I don't see these toys anymore in any parks. But that's what the sympathetic and parasympathetic system is doing. One is upregulated and the other one is downregulated and vice versa. So what I want to draw for you folks right now is 2 seesaws. And I'm going to start with, I'm just going to draw 2 fulcrums, 2 focal points here where I can draw my seesaws. And I'm going to change my color. I'm going to use 2 colors, blue and red. So this first blue part is going to be up this way. And this is the part of the seesaw that is parasympathetic. I'm going to draw it down here too. So blue will be parasympathetic. And then I'm going to change my color to red. And red is going to be the sympathetic nervous system, which I'm going to draw down here. Okay, that's our seesaw, right? This is the sympathetic branch. All right, sympathetic. All right, now I'm going to change my color back to black so that I can take notes. Okay, here we go. So the parasympathetic branch, right now, you folks see it's up, right? So here, what I'm showing you is parasympathetic is upregulated. And look, if the parasympathetic is upregulated, the sympathetic nervous system has to be turned off because they work against each other. They can't both be on at the same time is because they will cancel each other out. So here, what the parasympathetic system is doing is it's doing all activities regarding rest and digest. So these activities are dominated during this time when parasympathetic system is upregulated. You feel tired, slow, sluggish, but your digestive system is digesting like crazy, okay? Remember, digestion is highly, highly, highly energetically expensive, okay? So in order for you to digest a lot, you got to turn off everything else, okay? Now, let's go to our other seesaw. Now here, what is upregulated? The sympathetic system is. Okay, so in here, when the sympathetic nervous system is upregulated, this is all your fight and flight responses. Sometimes you'll hear me say fight and flee. It's the same thing. You're running away. Okay, flight, flee. And all these activities are dominating. Okay, and this is when your heart rate starts to increase or blood is shunted to areas to help you fight or actually run away. Okay, all right, so those are the branches of the autonomic nervous system that we're going to be talking about. Now, something important, I just want to reiterate, when one is upregulated, the other one has to be downregulated. You don't have them upregulated at the same time. Doesn't work that way. Okay? All right. Now, where we're going is I want to show you folks that all the autonomic neurons, right? They are going to innervate. Where should we put that? We'll put that up here. So all the neurons, they're going to innervate. Smooth muscle. Cardiac muscle. Glands. A whole bunch of tissues, okay, in order for us to maintain homeostasis. Interesting. Also, the branches of the nervous system. Those neurons are going to go in and innervate other systems. So we're going to work with endocrine systems and behavioral. It's going to tap into your behavioral systems in order to maintain homeostasis. Okay, let's do some examples of that. It's very important. Let's do this. All right, so let's review these autonomic nervous system neurons, and they're living in these control centers, and these control centers are nuclei. Okay, you folks remember nuclei? A bunch of neuronal cell bodies living in the CNS, performing the same job. Okay, now in here, the autonomic control centers are going to come out of 3 areas of the CNS. And so we're going to have, number 1, we're going to have the hypothalamus. Number 2, the pons, cute little pons. And then number 3 is going to be the medulla oblongata. Okay, now let's talk about the hypothalamus first because I put it as number 1. So remember, this is the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus has so many functions. My anatomy students, you folks remember, like, oh my God, the hypothalamus, do we need to know all these functions? Yeah, you got to know all these functions, and this is why, because we're going to use them, okay? So in the hypothalamus, boom. Okay, so in the hypothalamus, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm not going to go over everything, but I'm just going to touch on the functions in the hypothalamus that I'm going to use as an example in the next slides, right? So temperature control, and this is old already because how many times have we said this past unit as well? Okay, I can't talk it right. Temperature. Okay, here we go. Is that right? It's fine. Temperature. Right? Temperature control. How hot or how cold are we? Water balance. What does that mean? That means that in the hypothalamus, there are neurons that can tell you, hey, are you thirsty? You better go drink water. So this is behavioral, okay? Also, there's hormones. Now we're talking about the endocrine system. Remember the previous page? I said there's neurons. We're going to recruit glands. We're going to recruit endocrine system. So water balance. And then also there's eating behavior in here. But let me not go there because I don't think my example says eating. But thirst, okay? So temperature, thirst, hypothalamus. Number 2, the pons. Oh, remember the pons is the cute belly. Okay, so I'm not going to change my colors, but just remember that this area is the pons, and then this is going to be the medulla oblongata. That is a beautiful name. All right, but in the pons, remember, we have breathing nuclei. Boom, and then there was 2 in here, yes? Right, so these, I can control breathing, right? I can regulate it there. Also, I shared with you folks, I'm going to make it into a triangle, right? Cardiovascular. I can control how fast or how slow my heart is beating. And then remember, I told you folks, what's coming out of the medulla oblongata? One of my favorite nerves. Oh, hello, inability to make a straight line. Oh, Lord. Okay, this is one nerve coming out of here. Let me just fill it all in. There, you folks get it, I hope, okay? This is the vagus, which means wanderer, right? Vagrant. This is a vagrant nerve. And in the previous lectures, I told you the vagus nerve is going to control all the parasympathetic functions, okay? That's your review, okay? So let's get to our example. All right, so let's go through a specific example that shows you how the hypothalamus, pons, and medulla oblongata can initiate both an autonomic response that involves endocrine input and behavioral input in order for us to maintain homeostasis. Now, I'm going to start off with my specific example. Oh my God, it is hot in here. And the valley gets really hot. So I know you folks know what I'm talking about. But for me specifically, I have tropical genes. This is not my native land. And so when I get very, very hot, like 107, over 100, I get a heat rash on my neck. And so I don't like the heat, and I don't like to itch. And so every time I get heat rash, I'm scratching my neck and I'm very uncomfortable. So that's going to set the stage for our example. So what I want to show you folks is a pathway, and we'll fill out this together. And the first thing that's going to happen is I need to sense the heat, right? So this is all sensory input. And for my specific example, if it's temperature hot, these are temperature receptors that are measuring this heat, okay? Now, sensory input, you folks know that goes to the CNS. And that's going to now, that signal is going to travel to the hypothalamus. Because remember, hypothalamus allows you to control the set point for a temperature of your body, right? Hypothalamus. Okay, so there's the hypothalamus sensors in here for temperature. And then in order to for us to feel temperature, right, we need to now have that input from that primary sensory neuron be transferred to somatic and visceral sensory neurons, so that these neurons that are now interneurons can help carry that information to the cerebral cortex. And if folks remember what's in the cerebral cortex. So for our example, we are going to be concerned with the primary somatic sensory cortex, because that's where we perceive heat or perceive a cold temperature. And we also are going to talk about the primary motor cortex. Okay, cool. Okay, hold on a second. Mommy is working. Now, these somatic and visceral sensory neurons, secondary and tertiary neurons that are bringing the message right to the cerebral cortex, are also going to synapse to the limbic system. Ah, why the limbic system? So remember, what's in the limbic system? This is memory and emotions. Because remember, our memories and emotions about certain events also help protect us, right? So if I don't like the heat because I remember, that's my emotion, I don't like the heat because I remember that it causes me great discomfort. This is another reason or way that we can now maintain homeostasis, okay? Now, hypothalamic sensors are all going to talk to then the pons, the medulla. I don't like just saying medulla. It's really a medulla oblongata, but I always run out of space, right? Okay, so pons, medulla oblongata, and then this is also the hypothalamus. Okay, and then I'm going to have now motor outputs, right? So look at these arrows. These are all, I'm trying to figure out where to write it here. Motor, right? This is efferent, exiting the CNS. What are these then? Sensory, afferent. Coming in, we're in the CNS. We integrate. Based on all of the information that's being integrated, we're going to do something about it and send the signal out. And we're going to have 3 different responses, right? And so here we're going to have a autonomic response. We're going to have an endocrine response. And we can also have a behavioral response. Okay. And what are those responses if I'm feeling so uncomfortably hot? This is what they are. Number 1, right? The autonomic response coming from all those control centers that I just delineated in the other page. I'm going to control my breathing. You folks look at dogs. When they're real hot, what do? Their breathing rates skyrockets. They start to pant, right? To cool down. What do our sweat glands do? We start to sweat in order to cool down. Those are autonomic responses that are allowing us to now innervate different organs and glands. Okay? What's the endocrine response? Hormonal. I'm going to secrete hormones that are coming out of the hypothalamus that are going to regulate how much water and salt that I maintain in the body so I don't run out of water and electrolytes while I'm sweating. Okay? And then also you have to have a behavioral response, and they can be many. Maybe I have a jacket and yeah, I'm hot. Take off the jacket. Or maybe I go get my skeletal muscle moving to the refrigerator and get some ice cold water and grab that cup of water and put it to my mouth. Those are all behavioral responses to, oh my God, it is so hot in here. All right. So let's do another example. Now, here's another example. Oh my God, she is so hot. And so the same thing happens. All these pathways get triggered, right? But it's not temperature. So let me change that. It's going to be, it's going to start with vision. Okay. Vision, or maybe you heard somebody talk, but right now I'm just going to say vision. So this is all via the optic nerve, and the same pathway is going to get lit up. But now in this case, the autonomic response can be, oh my God, you're blushing because somebody is attractive to you, or you're having butterfly in your stomach. Some people, when they see somebody attractive, they start to sweat, or the heart rate starts going dun 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 dun, right? Those are autonomic responses. Endocrine's response, right? You start to secrete hormones from the hypothalamus and the pituitary. We'll talk about that later, but you start to secrete hormones that are going to start causing you to become aroused. And behavioral responses. This is different for different people. Some people giggle, some people play with their hair, some people like to posture. I usually shut down if I see somebody attractive. I get real quiet. Except this one time when I saw Jason Momoa at a peaceful protest, and man, I almost broke my back trying to reach over and take a picture of him with my phone. But anyway, hypothalamus, pons, medulla oblongata will go ahead and initiate autonomic, endocrine, and behavioral responses so that we can maintain homeostasis. except when you're trying to break your back trying to take a picture of somebody who's famous. Anyway, that's it for this lecturette. I'll see you folks for the next one.